Hey guys, it's Dave. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for watching. This is a bit of a different video for you. I found it extremely fun to make, and I'm really just breaking down the next generation rockets of the future and putting them all into a bunch of different categories for you guys. I thought it was a lot of fun. There's some laughs, there's some more serious comments, and if you're not too familiar with rockets, I think this will be a great way to kind of let you remember the different rockets and categorize them and give you a good idea how to think about them. Now, this video is almost certainly going to be demonetized because of a lot of the different footage and stuff like that I used, but I still did it anyway just because I had a lot of fun. I think it's pretty funny, and why not? But that being said, if anything you can do to help support the channel, since I won't be getting any revenue on this one, whether it's likes, subscribes, sharing, helping spread the channel and grow it larger, would be very much appreciated. With that out of the way, let's kick it off breaking down the rockets of the next decade.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Number one, and this should come as no surprise to anyone, the massive beast of a rocket, the biggest ever built. This one is indisputably in the pole position for rockets of the future, and that is SpaceX's Starship. It's no coincidence that this rocket is named after a giant with a king in the name, standing atop the highest building, towering over the rest of the city. In a fully expendable mode, Starship can deliver an astounding 300 tons to low Earth orbit. In reusable mode, it will be able to deliver 150 tons and may very well be the first rocket to ever achieve 100% reusability, something many consider to be the holy grail of rocketry. Starship already has a contract to bring humans back to the moon for the first time since before I was born. It will be the landing vehicle for these humans who will be actually ferried over to the moon in a NASA Orion spacecraft, but they will dock with Starship and then go down to the moon. They have a lot of very exciting contracts, and it's just an absolutely massive, ambitious beast of a rocket project, and really the rocket to beat for everyone else. So yeah, that's Starship for you. I have a few key questions that we're going to be watching as the development process of Starship unfolds. Luckily, they are developing and doing a lot of testing right out in the open, and we can all watch and see, almost like another display of dominance from King Kong, I suppose you could say. So my first question is, how difficult is it going to be for them to master on-orbit refueling? This is something that's going to be key to send Starship beyond low Earth orbit for those missions to the moon, potentially even Mars and beyond. Is really a key technology that they're going to need to be able to figure out and demonstrate, launching a tanker vehicle up into low Earth orbit and refueling their Starship vehicle. Another key question I have is on their second stage, they are using heat shield tiles, not too dissimilar from the old space shuttle. But if you remember the space shuttle heat shields, they had massive problems, had to go through a huge, expensive inspection and refurbishment process after every launch. And it was really, in some senses, the Achilles heel of the space shuttle, which was planned to make space much more affordable and ultimately failed in that mission. Starship, hoping to succeed where Space Shuttle failed, will need to have an extremely reliable heat shield that doesn't need a ton of work and inspections after every launch, so I'll be following that very closely. It'll be interesting to see how their new heat shield system fares compared to the old Space Shuttle. So that's Starship, King Kong of the upcoming rocket industry, and clearly the rocket to beat for all the competitors. The SLS rocket, what can I say about the SLS that hasn't already been said many times before on other YouTube channels? This huge, expensive rocket has been in development for what feels like my entire adult life, and is a prime example of why the politicians should not be making decisions for NASA when it comes to rockets and suppliers. The SLS is finally coming online at a time when it is practically obsolete from the get-go, employing no reusability, the result of massive ongoing cost overruns from old-school contractors using cost-plus contracts where they can continue to bill NASA for their costs as they incur, giving them no incentive to rein in their spending. However, one good thing I will say for the rocket is if they can successfully deliver humans to the moon using the Lockheed Orion capsule, it will at least cement its place in the history of spaceflight and perhaps not be a complete waste of time and money for the American taxpayers. So yeah, that's the SLS rocket. Clearly, in my opinion, a dinosaur. It will launch. It will be very expensive. Hopefully, it can take humans to the moon, but it will never be cheap or commercially viable, and it will exclusively be a NASA rocket as far as I can tell. Key questions I have for the SLS is they have some planned upgrades for it, Block 1B and Block 2 variants, which will give it advanced capabilities. Will NASA end up actually going through with paying for these upgrades and having the rocket grow even heavier? Personally, I think there's an argument to be made that it's probably not worth it, and it really goes into the whole gateway concept of having a space station in a rectilinear orbit around the moon. I'm not going to dive too deep on that, but basically my questions are we going to continue to invest in this rocket, spend more money on it in a system that's completely expendable and incredibly expensive? I think maybe, I hope not. Anyway, that's the SLS, and that's why I put it firmly in the dinosaur category of rockets. Next up, Europe's Ariane 6 rocket. Europe's next launcher has been under development for many years as well, and I put it under the dinosaur category primarily because it's a heavy lift vehicle that will not be using any reusability. As far as I'm concerned, that means it will never be able to be competitive on price in the heavy lift category. Nevertheless, Europe wants to make sure they have their own launch vehicle for strategic reasons and having independent launch capability, so the Ariane 6 will definitely come to fruition. Ariane already has several contracts in the books, and this dinosaur should at least see a decent amount of use. It will be, if nothing else, reliable. However, it will be much more expensive than potential other future commercial offerings. So that's Ariane 6 for you. I consider it to also be a bit of a dinosaur. I think any rocket coming online without any sort of reusability is really just, living in the 90s, and companies really need to focus on reusability if they want to compete and be viable in the rocket market of the 2030s and beyond, which is what this list is of. Key questions for the Ariane 6 is how cheap are they actually going to be able to get this price? It will be expendable, but they're trying to bring it down via manufacturing techniques and things of that nature. So hopefully they can at least reduce costs a little bit, and it's not going to be something on the order of the SLS in terms of, crazy costs for the ESA and Europe. And when will it finally debut? We've had tons of delays. When is this rocket going to finally launch? You'll see that question as a bit of a theme for a lot of the rockets on this list. So that's it for the dinosaurs, and now on to our next category.
I'm a grumpy old man. I don't like everything the way it is now compared to the way it used to be.
United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rocket avoided being put under the dinosaur category by the skin of its teeth, thanks to their plans to possibly, eventually, recover and reuse the first stage engines on the rocket. Still, while this might be an important rocket in the future, I don't believe it will be able to compete for price or cadence with other commercial vehicles planning to reuse the entire first stage or potentially even more in the 2030s and beyond. Even so, ULA does have some significant contracts over the next decade, and this will likely be the biggest representative of the old guard category, as these old school rocket companies are being dragged kicking and screaming into the era of modern reusable vehicles. Key questions I have about this rocket is we know that ULA is likely to be put on the market in the coming years, and who, if any, will buy them, and what will that mean for the future of the Vulcan rocket that's already really far along in the development process. I'm also wondering about the engines. Vulcan's first stage engines will be made by Blue Origin. It's the same engines that will fly on Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket. So I'm very curious on how fast Blue Origin can manufacture these engines. They've been rife with delays and problems, so it's definitely could be a big bottleneck for Vulcan and ULA. How many engines can they get? Can they meet their cadence that they have sold? And when will they put that smart reuse concept into action? They've talked about it, but we don't really have any firm details. Definitely won't be on the first few launches, but hopefully they do at least start recovering these engines in the first place. Yes, the engines are some of the most expensive parts of the rocket, but I really wish they were trying to recover the entire first stage at this point. And the Northrop Antares 330. Northrop Grumman, another of the proverbial old guard, will be coming online with their newly upgraded Antares 330 rocket within the next few years. The company partnered with newcomer Firefly out of necessity after their Russian engines they've used in the past are no longer available. Another rocket that I'm not particularly excited about, but it will at least see some resupply missions for the International Space Station, so it will get some use in the future. At first, you might be a bit surprised to see the Neutron being called tiny, as it's actually much larger than Rocket Lab's first Electron rocket, and there's many smaller vehicles out there. However, when you look at the types of contracts that Neutron is expected to compete for, this small workhorse of a vehicle will be going against some much larger heavyweight rockets, some of which have already been featured today earlier in the video. However, due to some very smart design decisions, including the full reuse of an oversized first stage as well as full reuse of the rocket fairings, I wouldn't count out the Neutron even when it goes up against much larger, heavier rockets of the future. Key questions for Neutron is it big enough? We've had a lot of people discuss whether it should be bigger. The theme of the rockets of the future in the 2030s and beyond seems to be that bigger is better. We're seeing Starship, we're seeing massive New Glenns. Everyone is going bigger. Rocket Lab is shooting for a much more reasonable size rocket fitting into that medium lift space as opposed to heavy. Can they compete on some of these massive satellite constellation contracts like Amazon's Kuiper constellation and others that will remain to be seen? As well, who will their big customer be? Most of the rockets on this list, we already know who their big customers are. Obviously, SpaceX is basically their own customer, as well as they have NASA. New Glenn from Blue Origin will obviously be launching Amazon's Kuiper constellation, as well as some other NASA missions and beyond. And Relativity and their Terran-R rocket actually has a large backlog, partly because they've discounted and given out those contracts at a cheaper rate, but they have a large backlog for many future launches. Rocket Lab doesn't have that backlog as of yet, so they really need a big, firm anchor customer to show that the rocket is serious and fill out that cadence, something that they can really build their customer base around. I'm kind of hoping it will be Amazon. I've speculated that in future videos. Amazon's desperate to get these launches going by 2026 and 2029. So we'll see on that one, but I'm definitely excited to watch the development of this small but fierce rocket. Blue Origin is famous for being quite secretive about the development process on their heavy-lift New Glenn rocket. Whereas SpaceX is a bit of an open book, developing King Kong out in the open on the top of a skyscraper, Blue Origin is more of a black box, and we really don't know a lot of the details on what is going on inside. Because of that, as well as numerous delays, a lot of people have begun to dismiss or count out the New Glenn. Honestly, I have no idea how close they are to launch, but I know for certain that Blue Origin remains committed to New Glenn. They've designed their lunar lander specifically to fit New Glenn's payload fairing. And this dark horse of a Challenger is the only other rocket outside of Starship to be working on a reusable second stage at this point, as far as I am aware. For that reason, there's always the chance that New Glenn surprises us, emerges from that black box, and climbs up to the number 2 spot on the Rockets of the Future list, or if Starship does stumble, perhaps even take that number 1 position, to the surprise of virtually everyone. Key questions I have about the New Glenn rocket is how close is that relationship between Blue Origin and Amazon with their massive number 2 Kuiper constellation? Obviously, Jeff Bezos founded both companies. He was the CEO of Amazon, but he's no longer Amazon's CEO, although he is a large owner of the company. That role in Amazon is now going to Andy Jassy. Will they give Blue Origin preferential treatment? Will they try to give New Glenn all the launches they can? Or will they be a bit more fair, as they've said, and spread around those launch contracts to other providers as well? Go with the lowest bidder or what makes the most sense, as opposed to always going with Blue Origin. I'll definitely be interested in following that story as it unfolds. And when will they actually launch? It's been very mysterious. We've had a lot of delays. They keep saying we'll launch when we're ready. I haven't seen any test fires of a full vehicle. They're really under wraps, and a lot of questions to be answered there. But who knows? Maybe they're ready to launch tomorrow, and really we just all don't know. Definitely a dark horse when it comes to the future of the rocket industry.
And Beckham saw Sullivan off his line. Oh! That is absolutely phenomenal.
Under the long shot category, first up we have Firefly's next generation medium launch vehicle. Planned to be a similar size to Rocket Lab's Neutron, I don't know too much about the next generation Firefly vehicle. However, Firefly has yet to launch anything successfully, which is why their vehicle lands firmly in the long shot category. Medium launch vehicle has been flying under the radar, but there's always a chance that this up-and-coming space company executes on its vision and gives Neutron a run for its money in that medium lift segment. Key questions I have about Firefly's next-gen vehicle are basically everything. When will they launch? Who will their big customers be? There's so many questions, more questions than answers really, and that's one of the reasons it is also in this long shot category. Next up, we have Astra's Rocket 4.0. Astra has a tough road ahead of them, with dwindling cash reserves, a failed first attempt at a rocket, and a lot of work ahead. Personally, I don't think they can make it without significant outside help from a new investor and new cash infusion, but maybe this scrappy company fighting for its life can surprise us all with their second generation Rocket 4.0 system. Rocket 4.0 will still be a small vehicle, delivering about 600 kilograms to low Earth orbit, or just under twice that of an Electron rocket. Definitely not what I would consider to be a mover and shaker in this upcoming launch industry, where we're talking about hundreds of tons going to orbit, but it'll be fun to keep an eye on and see if this company can fight through and survive. Key questions I have about Astra and their next generation rocket are the customers. I think we do have some NASA contracts for them, but not a huge manifest, is from what I can understand. When they'll be ready to launch. I have a ton of questions around their finances. Will they actually make it to launching this vehicle for the first time? And even if they do get a successful launch, where's the money going to come from to continue making more of them, continue their business operations until they can reach profitability? Because as we all know, one successful rocket launch does not a profitable company make. The next long shot we have is ABL Space and their RS-1 rocket. Very much flying under the radar is ABL, a small private rocket company out of Alaska. Thus far, their launch attempts have not been successful, but they do have some contracts, and I'll be following their small RS-1 rocket with some interest.
I have a dream I hope will come true.
Relativity is quite an interesting space company. They have no shortage of ambition and have made some pretty large promises that they've later had to walk back on. The whole company is a bit of an experiment. What if you give new school, young, Silicon Valley entrepreneurs massive amounts of capital? Will they disrupt the entire launch industry with new manufacturing methods, including a huge reliance on 3D printing and iterative design? Or will they fall flat on their face and run out of funding? It remains to be seen, but it'll be extremely interesting to watch the Terran-R rocket take shape and try to launch for the first time. This rocket will feature a reusable first stage, but not a reusable second stage, as the company has had to walk back on that previous promise, and their first attempt at a rocket launch was almost successful, but their second stage did not light successfully and they did not reach orbit. Key questions I have about the Terran-R rocket is how much capital is left in this company. They're not publicly traded. We can't see their balance sheet, so I have really no idea how much money they have, but they've surely been burning it at a pretty prodigious rate. When will they launch it? They do have a huge backlog of customers, but can they actually meet that demand? Can they hit those ambitious price targets, those discounts they've already given out? They've said that they can launch for, I believe, around 55 million. I have my doubts that they can hit that target. I don't think they have a lot of experience in the day-to-day operations of ongoing launches, but I will be excited to see them prove me wrong. I do like their CEO, Tim Ellis, and I will be watching with a lot of interest. So that's how the next generation, the next decade of rockets is looking to shape up. Let me know down in the comments below. Is there a rocket I didn't cover that you're interested in? There's so many out there. There's no way I can cover them all, especially rockets outside of the Western world. Always interested to hear your thoughts. Which one of these rockets is your favorite? I'm sure I'll see a lot of Starship, probably a lot of Neutron, maybe some Relativity fans in there. Happy to continue the conversation down below. If you like this video, please consider hitting subscribe, like, share, hit the notifications bell, all that good stuff. I'll see you in the next video. I hope you have a great day. Bye for now.